Usato is a good-for-nothing, pathetic loser who desires to live a peaceful life. However, his life changes completely when he gets teleported into another world alongside some folks he just met. In that world, it is revealed that Usato just got dragged alongside the other two for no reason and is pretty much useless. Things take a turn for the good when it is unveiled that Usato actually possesses the rare healing magic. Student Council President Inukami and Kazuki are heading towards the Student Council room, with students wondering if they are dating because their nosiness level is over 9,000. Inukami is eager to modify the school regulations as the ultimate simp Kazuki informs her that the required paperwork has already been prepared. Ken Usato, on the other hand, is a pathetic loser who wants to lead an average school life. His days are dull, but he wishes not to become a worthless NEET unlike you guys. As Usato prepares to return home, he realizes that his umbrella is missing and wonders if someone's broken ass stole it. He then spots another abandoned umbrella, but his conscience prevents him from taking it, so he waits for the rain to end. Even after waiting there for some time, the rain doesn't seem to halt. Suddenly, Inukami appears out of nowhere and questions his presence there, which shocks Usato, because he's a loser who had never talked to a woman before. He's just like me. Anyways, she asks if he doesn't have an umbrella, to which he replies positively. Before she could say anything else, Usato announces that he's heading home, but Inukami stops him, asserting that she can't allow a student to drench in rain. In the meantime, Kazuki also appears at the spot and offers Usato his spare umbrella. This shocks Usato as he wasn't expecting Kazuki to remember his name and deciphers that despite his looks, he is actually a nice guy. After formally introducing each other, Inukami offers to walk together, which further shocks him as the most popular girl of school just offered filth like him to accompany them. As they are walking, Usato comments that he was expecting Kazuki to be a jerk who just likes to play around with women, but he's actually a nice guy. He further questions them if they are dating, to which they reply negatively and assert that he shouldn't believe people blindly, just like I believed in Santa till I was 12. They continue conversing as Inukami eventually asks Usato about his future ambitions, because she doesn't have one herself. This shocks Usato, as she further tells him that she's perfect in everything, and ends up getting bored. She just called Usato a talentless loser in 1,000 different languages. Just then, Inukami and Kazuki start hearing bells ringing, and it keeps getting louder. Usato, however, cannot hear anything and wonders if all that studying has gotten to their heads. Suddenly, a magic circle appears beneath them and teleports them to another world where Kazuki wakes Usato up. Truck-kun will probably lose his job if this continues. Kazuki and Usato are quite concerned about all this, but Inukami seems weirdly excited, which makes Usato realize that she must have hit her brain back in those days. The king then introduces himself as Lloyd Volgest Linger of the Linger Kingdom and reveals that they have summoned them as heroes from another world. He further tells him that they want them to defeat the Demon Lord. Hearing this, Kazuki gets infuriated as he doesn't give a shit about them and asks them to return back home. The king, however, tells him that it is not possible because they can only summon people but not return them. This further infuriates Kazuki, and he attempts to argue, but the knights point their spears towards them. This shocks Inukami, who was literally bursting herself till this point. Just then, the king approaches them and literally begs them to help their sorry ass because his knights are way too worthless. Inukami then questions the reason for summoning them as the king's assistant. Welsi informs them that they were searching for people with potential for becoming the hero and that they must have heard some bells ringing before getting teleported here. This makes Usato realize that he was just dragged into all this and is as useful as a one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest. I'm glad he didn't get the Naofumi treatment. After this, they are taken to a room where their magic aptitude is tested, and it is revealed that Inukami has aptitude for thunder magic, while Kazuki has aptitude for light magic. They even ask Usato to place his hand on the magic ball to check his aptitude even though he's a worthless loser. For Usato, his ball turns green, which scares the living shit out of Welsi, and she immediately informs the king, who pisses himself after hearing this. The king instructs to take Usato as far away from the castle as possible, which makes Usato wonder if he's done something wrong. Just then, a woman enters the hall and questions the king regarding the ceremony. The king, who is scared for his life, informs her about the ceremony and addresses her as Rose. Seeing Usato, she asks if he's the hero, to which he replies negatively. She then introduces herself as Captain Rose of the rescue squad. Welsi then offers to take Rose to the heroes, while the king asks Usato to relax in his room. Usato, however, questions the king about his magic attribute and mentions the word green, which piques Rose's interest, and she decides to take Usato with her. Welsi tries her best to save him, but Rose eventually captures him and takes him along. Welsi then informs Inukami and Kazuki that Usato's magic is healing, which is quite rare, and Captain Rose is also a healer. She plans to take Usato as her subordinate. Later on, Rose informs Usato about his aptitude and that he'll be living alongside them from now on. She also introduces him to the members of Healing Squad, who look like literal thugs, which makes Usato wonder if they are going to sacrifice him. Rose further tells him about 2 other healers that are stationed in the capital and that his training will begin tomorrow. Usato wakes up the following day, hoping that all of this is a dream, but much to his disappointment, this is as real as finding out that your crush only sees you as a friend. As he is thinking about all this, his comrade informs him that he has some visitors, and it turns out that Kazuki and Inukami have come to see if he's alive. During their conversation, Kazuki announces that he has decided to save this world, and for that, he will do his best. With this, both of them leave Usato alone in this hell. Rose, who probably identifies as a freaking gorilla, appears at the spot and hands him a diary to record his training. Following this, his training begins, and Usato notices that this hellish training is not that tough, as Rose just teaches him to concentrate his magic and project it out of his body. She then hands over a book that will guide him about everything in this world, as Usato tells her that he cannot possibly read a new language like that. However, much to his surprise, he can actually read and understand everything, as Rose tells him that the ones summoned by the hero ceremony have an auto-translation cast on them. She then educates him about the kingdom's neighboring countries, which makes him realize that they are basically the demon's first target. Usato continues reading the book because he's locked in, unlike you losers who need a deadline to finish stuff. On day 2, Usato is forced to run a lot, which he deems weird because he's supposed to be training for magic. He continues running on day 3 as well and gets his ass whooped by Rose even if he stops for a moment. Well, she heals him as well, so he can continue running, and the hellish training continues. On day 4, Usato gets the opportunity to train with other squad members, and it pisses him off seeing all of them surpass him easily. Usato keeps running on day 5 and 6 as well. However, on day 6, he notices a green light coming out of his hand, but doesn't think much about it. The following day, he gets his ass whooped by Rose once again, who warns him to not hate her, because that would make the training even worse. This makes him wonder if she has been reading his diary. At this point, Usato's ass has gotten used to getting whooped by Rose, and he might as well call himself Nickel Nethers or something. On day 9, as Usato touches his ass in sheer pain, his hands start glowing, and he heals himself. From that point onward, Usato can now run without exhausting himself because he has learned to output his healing magic. After all this running, Rose has now added push-ups to Usato's training regime, and he's supposed to do 1,000 of them. As Usato is doing push-ups, Rose tells him the reason behind all this physical training. She tells him that he's supposed to save his comrades from dying, and the faster he runs, the faster he'll be able to save them. This makes Usato realize the importance of all this training. From that point onward, Usato's training consists of running all morning and doing push-ups till evening since he is training to become first ever natural Mr. Olympia. Seeing that these tasks have gotten harder for Usato, Rose ties some weights to his body. After all this, as Usato heads back to the base, he asks his comrades about his lunch that had disappeared out of nowhere. Hearing this, one of them admits that he ate his lunch and pretends that he didn't know it belonged to him. This pisses him off, and Usato starts chasing him around like a wild boar. After some days, Inukami and Kazuki visit Usato during his training. They see him performing push-ups with a huge boulder and Rose on his back. He attempts to gaslight Rose by saying that she is way too light, but she pulls an Uno reverse and places another boulder on him. Despite all this weight, Usato manages to complete the push-up, which pleases Rose. This shocks Kazuki, while Inukami starts simping over his insane muscles. Meanwhile, the knight who is accompanying Kazuki and Inukami gets infuriated and starts a beef with Rose. He must be some big shot for grabbing Rose's collar like that, or maybe he wants to get isekai'd. Usato fails to comprehend what is happening as Rose allows him to take a break. Kazuki and Inukami also accompany him, and they settle down beside a riverbank. It is revealed that the knight is actually the commander general of Linger's army, and the girl accompanying them is the princess. As they are talking about their training, Inukami decides to take a peek at Usato's muscles and grabs his shirt. "She is down bad for our boy!" Kazuki then asks if he is having a tough time, to which he replies positively. Usato further tells him that he wanted to run away in the beginning, but he doesn't feel the same now, and he just wants to help them in any way possible. After all this, the comrade who had eaten Usato's lunch before brings him another lunch, and they both start fighting like kids. Kazuki and Inukami, on the other hand, decide to leave for the castle and continue their training. Later that night, Usato also notices that his body has changed a lot and realizes that all that training was worth it. The following morning, Rose hands over a massive bag to Usato and informs him that they are heading outside today. She then takes him outside the capital as they eventually reach a forest named the Darkness of Linger that is filled with deadly monsters. She further informs him that he is not allowed to come back until he kills a grand grizzly. Hearing this, Usato literally pisses himself and attempts to argue, but Rose grabs him and throws him into the forest. Watch this next video!